Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Sounds like there's a campaign going on or something like that. Thank you. Before I start, I want to introduce the one granddaughter that came with me. Not too many came from Texas, but Valerie, my granddaughter, and with her husband, Jesse, over here. I'm sure I should go down a list and thank all the special people here who worked so hard to put this together, but I think everybody needs thanked, and I thank everybody for joining this effort because it's starting to pay off, and I'm starting to get excited about what's happening. Used to be, I thought it was a lonely fight, but I don't think it's so lonely anymore. Matter of fact, I think you're out there all the time. I just hadn't heard from you, but it's been wonderful. The things are changing in Washington. I'm not the speaker yet, but you know. But they know you're out there, and they're starting to pay attention. And it came out of the campaign, the presidential campaign, along with the Campaign for Liberty. It does make a difference. Numbers. Politicians in Washington look at numbers. They look at who can raise some money and who can find some people, and then all of a sudden, oh, those views must be pretty important then. So they know we exist, and it isn't just Republicans or just Democrats, it's both, especially those who are in marginal districts. Then they think, oh boy, we gotta support your bills, and they come around and they're very supportive. But our numbers are growing, and you heard the numbers. You know, that little bill we've introduced to just do that little trick, find out a little bit more about the Federal Reserve, that 1207, I think about 174 people right now that we have signed on to it. Actually, things have come together on that. I mean, the effort's been there a long time before I started, because you can go back to Wright Patman and Henry Gonzalez and others who have talked about looking into the Federal Reserve. They knew there were problems with the Federal Reserve, and they never got anywhere. Because the pressure wasn't all that great, and a lot of people didn't understand it. But the conditions are a lot different today. And since the campaign, along with the collapsing economy, people are looking for answers. And I think what really got their attention was when the Congress, you know, immediately responded like they do to emergency. They start passing legislation. The bigger the better. The less they read it, it seems like it's supposed to be better. You know, like 9/11, oh, let's pass the Patriot Act. We're all patriots now, so we'll pass the Patriot Act. So, of course, the first, there were many bills passed, but the TARP was the big one, you know, $700 billion. And all of a sudden, the people, the voters, asked, well, where'd the money go? Oh, yeah, a couple big shots got some bonuses, and then they went and retired. Tens of millions, if not billions of dollars down the drain. Nobody knew where it went. So they said, you know, you ought to find out where you spent the money. So the idea of oversight and transparency came up. But then we were able to get their attention and say, well, you know, the Federal Reserve has something to do with this, too. They don't deal in hundreds of billions. They deal in trillions of dollars. It's about time the American people found out what they're doing behind the scenes. And this came together, and that's how it came about. But if you had not been active, it wouldn't have happened. Because by my nature, I'm not one to badger my colleagues and go and say, will you sign on this, will you sign on that? Because the general tradition is, you sign on this, I'll sign on this, and there's always this trade-off. I have to have them motivated to do it. And the people have motivated them. And I understand, I think in this state, you have motivated 7 out of 9. That sounds pretty good to me. But the economy has obviously been a big issue that we've been dealing with in Washington these last few months. And I think there's some good things coming out of the debate. It's similar in some ways to what happened after the crash in 1929 and we had the Depression. It was a tragedy then because Keynesianism was just coming into vogue. And the challenge there was, well, it was too much capitalism, too much freedom, and too much gold standard. And that was the cause. And they more or less won that argument. You know, they dispensed with the gold standard, and they went to welfarism and interventionism and pseudo-socialism, and that's what we've been living with all these times. So we have another crisis, a predictable crisis. Most of us expected it would come. We couldn't name the date, but it did come, and now they're doing the same thing over again. But this is the intellectual fight once again. Who's going to get blamed? That is going to be the key. Who brought on this crisis? And you can listen to the news on a nightly basis, and it's not enough regulation, too much freedom, too much capitalism. But we know that it was too much cronyism, too much special interest, too much corporatism, too much inflationism, and too much Federal Reserve. And this time we have the upper edge. They can't blame the gold standard this time. We can blame the paper standard. That's where the problem came from. And it was, of course, it was the abuse of the gold standard back in the 20s and before that. Because, you know, it really didn't take too long for the Federal Reserve to show its true colors. And it was established in 1913. They inflated for World War I, and then we had the Depression of 21. But back in 1921, at least we had enough sense not to overdo it. But a lot has happened, a lot has transpired, the conditions are ripe, and conditions are different than they have ever been in the history of the world. This has been the biggest financial bubble ever recorded, and the origination of the bubble came from this country with the dollar, because we had the dollar as the reserve standard. We had the privilege of printing the gold and printing the money where other countries took it. Then they took it and they monetized our debt. It looked like magic for us. We were getting away with economic murder, so to speak, because we were living way beyond our means, and we had a great deal of wealth, and everybody, you know, looked at their 401ks and, boy, I'm wealthy, I'm retiring next year. A lot of them aren't retiring next year because that wealth was fictitious and it was based on a lot of debt and a lot of foolishness that finally came to light. And now it will not be, you know, a country here and a country there. It is worldwide. And since we are the biggest debtor of the world, and it originated with the dollar, we'll probably suffer the most because we benefited the most. The people who had the greatest degree of the bubble right now in this country are suffering the most. If there's a bigger bubble in California and Nevada for housing than there was in Texas, Florida was big, and they, of course, are suffering the biggest changes. I think we as a country will probably suffer more because I believe the next leg in the economic crisis will be the credibility of the dollar. And even this very week, we have seen some sharp rises in interest rates. Nothing like what we're going to see, but there are some significant changes. They just can't sell. You know, it used to be a million, billion, 100 million, 100 billion, hundreds of billions. Now it's trillions of dollars. You know, even though I'm sort of attuned to this stuff, but it still shocks me to think that, you know, that they continue to do it. But what really is shocking, that the people I know in Washington, they hardly blink an eye. You know, they just don't seem, behind the scenes they'll express a little bit of concern, but not really.